Gaza is often discussed as a conflict without end, but beneath the violence lies a deeper question, not only about Gaza, but about Israel itself, about ideology, identity, and whether a state can survive when it defines itself through permanent conflict.
For Israel to survive, it has to let go of Zionism and become a normal Israel without an ideology, a state for its own citizens without Zionism. If it reaches to this point, it will have a chance to integrate in this region and even flourish in this region, because there are so many commonalities between Israel and its neighbors.
That same logic extends beyond the battlefield. It shapes how history is recognized, which rights are acknowledged, and which institutions are seen as threats.
Israel's mindset and policies, UNRWA represents the international mandate that holds onto Palestinians' rights of return. It is the institution through which the international community has recognized the suffering of the Palestinians. It recognized that there are millions of Palestinian refugees who have been displaced from their own land.
From Lisbon, Frontlines and Backrooms podcast. Your host, Vladimir Bobatik.
In this series, we've been asking what makes Gaza an exception, not only politically but legally and morally. In this episode, we move from events to structure, from moments of violence to the system that contains them. Because Gaza is not only shaped by war, but by rules. Rules about movement, governance, responsibility, and control. What looks like chaos on the surface is in effect a managed reality. A permanent crisis designed not to be resolved, but to be maintained. Dr. Tamer Qarmout is an associate professor of public policy at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies in Qatar. He previously served in senior management roles at the United Nations Development Programme (UNDP), working on institutional development and post-conflict recovery. His research focuses on governance, aid, and political systems in fragile and conflict settings, particularly Gaza. He is the author of Delivering Aid Without Government: International Aid and Civil Society Engagement in the Recovery and Reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. Dr. Qarmout, thank you so much for your time and for speaking with Frontlines and Backrooms. The premise of this episode is the Gaza Exception, the idea that the rules of the international system seem to be suspended when it comes to Gaza. As someone who studies Gaza's political economy, does that framing resonate with you? Is Gaza truly an exception, or is it the logical outcome of how the international system functions when it confronts a population for which it has no political solution?
Vladimir, that's a very good question. And the exception of Gaza has been always the case. And just for your listeners, I'm Palestinian Gazan, half of my side. I was born in Gaza, lived Gaza through my entire 30 years. And then after I left Gaza 10 years ago, and I can tell you, I mean, being born under a direct Israeli occupation, it's the best testimony of the tragedy to understand the complexity and the hardships that Palestinians face under this Israeli occupation. It's beyond. I don't have enough words to describe it. But the concept of dehumanizing Palestinians from their birth has been always there. It's a systematic policy applied by the Israelis. And again, it goes back to the establishment of Israel as a settler colonial project that wants a land that has its own people, but it wants it without the people. So this colonial approach to the entire occupied land has been always there from the establishment of Israel as a Zionist state, and it goes onwards. It continues now with a more aggressive approach. Is Gaza an exception? I don't think it's an exception historically. I mean, it's an exception in today's modern reality because this is basically the last colonial occupation in its ugly form, where it still embraces the goal of displacing the indigenous population. This happened in North America. It happened in Australia. It happened in different parts of the world centuries ago. But it's still going now in today's modern life, when the entire globe has embraced international law and international norms and human rights. And then the exception of Gaza and Palestine overall, it remains there unchallenged because of what Israel is, its nature, and because of the countries that support Israel as a political and economic and military entity that has a specific purpose in the region. So one has to look at this conflict from this angle, that Palestine is remains under these vicious circumstances, inhumane, and then you have Israel, which enjoys the protection and has an upper hand in dictating what happens in Palestine, and then a paralysis where you have an international community is observing, condemning, but unable to do anything because, sadly, as you know, also Vladimir, uh, today the international law has become also a victim of the bullying and the vicious politics of global powers, be it the US, be it other countries, and it is being marginalized to a very scary extent, where there is no reference or there is no way for small countries or small nations to fend their interests when we see the UN paralyzed, when we see the International Court of Justice being marginalized, when you see this complicity in applying international law. I mean, it has been applied in the Balkans, but it not applied in Israel. And you know, and there's so many examples on this. So this is where things stand now, where you have Israel is literally a pariah state. It's acting above international law with the immunity it receives from the US. I can tell you, Europe by large is not happy with what it sees, but it cannot challenge the US when it comes to its stand on Israel and this organic strategic relation between the US and Israel. So that's one angle we could start looking at or analyzing the conflict from.
I'm wondering, is it really possible that Israel, increasingly treated as a pariah state together with the United States, is powerful enough that the rest of the world is willing to watch what many describe as a live streamed genocide? We have declarations, UN resolutions, and yet nothing changes. How did we reach a point where the world watches this unfold and says, well, it's Israel, there is nothing we can do?
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, I myself as a human being, as a human being, not even as a Palestinian. I mean, I I cannot apply any humane logic to this behavior. But the only way I can describe it is basically animalistic and pure interest driven, where you see these changing dynamics in today's global politics. uh, the human value is becoming less and less relevant or important to certain interest groups or certain powerful groups in the global system that really don't care. They will do anything that it takes to get to their interests, regardless of the human losses, regardless of the tragedies. And the problem also, and we cannot only, I mean, Palestine is the greater symptom of this failure of humanity, but there are also other contexts or other conflicts in the world that has been also overlooked and more or less normalized to an extent that the global watcher has become so used to human suffering and human mass killing and tragedies, and then becomes empathetic. And I mean, it just indifference. This indifference becomes the norm. And like, if I want to talk about Sudan or Libya or many conflicts in Africa, We were talking today about even Venezuela. We don't know what's waiting for Venezuela. In Ukraine, there is a vicious conflict that has been going for 4 years now. So the problem is Palestine has suffered more than all of these countries, but because of these emerging and increasing tendencies of global conflicts, my worry and fear is that Palestine, with its own unique tragedy, is becoming a less priority or something that is normal in comparison to other vicious conflicts that we're seeing worldwide. And so this is where more or less I think the global attention or the sympathy remains, but it becomes paralyzed, and it lacks tools or action to challenge or stop the status quo, because the tools themselves or the institutions that were made or designed by the same countries that are violating it now has been a victim of these conflicts itself, because of the double standards and because of, if I want to put it this way, the masks has been taken off the faces. Now, like your example, as Palestinians have been dealing with Israel for more than 6, 7 decades with this conflict, with this colonial state, with this occupation. But because of the sensitivities around Israel and its creation and the horrors of the Holocaust, Israel has always received this special status, uh, mainly from Western countries, mainly from the US. But now the mask is not there anymore. You can see truly the ugly face of Israel, but it's too late. It's too late in a sense that the US itself has changed to become so also so brutal in its global policies, in its foreign policies, in its political agenda, and it doesn't care anymore. So Israel has become more or less as an ally to the US to advance these interests. So what I'm trying to say, in the midst of all these very complicated global dynamics, Palestine is more or less overshadowed by something bigger and probably worse to come. I would not just for me to stress on this point. The genocide is there. No one's gonna overshadow it. It will always hunt Israel and the U.S. when there is a healthy global international system that has accountability measure. As long as this system is not in place and there are no checks and balances, my anticipation is that the horrors and the genocide of Gaza will be replicated in other contexts, and the indifference, the global indifference, will become a norm that lives with humanity, where they become so familiar with these scenes because they have tolerated it for 2 years and they were not able to stop it. And then that's it. So that's the failure of humanity. And this is where I think I worry about the very near future, that things can even get uglier in more increasing and other conflicts.
You've written extensively about development in Gaza under siege. Some scholars, as Professor Shireen Seikali, have described Gaza as a laboratory. What has this laboratory produced, intentionally or unintentionally? What models of governance, economy, or social survival have been developed under these conditions?
So the word or the term laboratory is correct in a sense, but I also will add to it, Gaza, since its creation, it was created to be the largest prison on earth, and it was prepared for the destiny it is facing now. Meaning, uh, since the establishment of Israel, and the different phases Israel was established, Gaza, the creation of the Gaza borders as it look now, this happened in 1967 after waves of displacing Palestinians. So if you look at the composition of Gazans, 70% of Gazans are originally refugees, Palestinian refugees who left their historical cities in Jaffa, in Akka, in Jaffa, from all over historical Palestine, and they were amassed into Gaza. And before this happens, Gaza also had very limited resources. It's a very small territory, a very small strip on the Mediterranean that mostly relied on trade and then agriculture. And then the trade option was immediately killed because Israel locked the borders, the external borders, and then you have 2.5 million people living on a very short strip of land, and there is nothing meaningful to live from but to rely on very limited resources internally, and externally rely on international aid assistance. And this is where UNRWA was created, with its massive apparatus providing health, education, all types of social services for the residents of Gaza, in the hope that one day this conflict will be over and then they will be able to return to their homelands, or compensated, or start something different. And this never materialized, never happened, because Oslo itself, the peace accord, was is dead. Literally, it's clinically dead. I mean, there's no Oslo anymore. Um, so why I'm saying it's the biggest jail on it's the biggest prison on earth, and it was more or less designed to be a ticking bomb that will explode at some point to generate the reaction Israel wants, so it could continue with its displacement project and making Gaza unlivable. That's what has been happening over the last 50 years or more. Because when you amass 2 million people, 2.5 million people, and you limit, or you limit any options for them to have a decent living, you treat them like, you dehumanize them, you strip them from their economic, social, human rights, and you would expect from them to remain silent and just accept whatever food or aid assistance is being delivered to them, and keep waiting. This I mean, in all sciences, be it social sciences, whatever, this will not go anywhere. So Gaza was prepared to be a ticking bomb, where at some point it will explode, and Gaza kept reacting from time to time through the first Intifada. If I want to put it this way, the first Intifada was the first major uprising against the Israelis, where civilians took peaceful ways of resistance, and then this led to the creation of the Palestinian Authority and Oslo, and then with the collapse of the Oslo peace tracks, Gaza has become so under, I mean, in a very dispersed situation, and under huge pressure because of Israeli blockade policies, Israelis marginalization policies, to a point where you had Hamas coming to rule Gaza. Because, in my opinion, as a Palestinian, as someone lived in Gaza, Hamas was a reaction or the outcome of these of Israel's brutal occupation policy, and of a failed peace process that did not generate any modern outcome or acceptable outcome to Palestinians to live it. So then you will have also an extreme side of Palestinian resistance that would want to also fight back in a very militarized way, when Palestinians really don't have the military means to face Israel, or to hit back on Israel. I mean, we know these are not very powerful weapons that Hamas has. But what I'm trying to say is that Gaza has reached to the point it reached today, not because only of October 7. October 7 was the culmination of all these failed policies, isolation, dehumanization, ignoring Palestinians' right, Palestinians' presence. And then the outcome is a militarized resistance movement that went beyond its means and beyond even the political logic, to fight in a vicious way. And then Israel, of course, was very happy with this, and it literally applied its heavy arm to conduct this genocidal war, and finish the project. When I say finish the project, make the Gaza Strip so unlivable, so people will leave voluntarily or forcefully, and it's just a matter of time. And I think we are getting to this stage now, because when you see how Israel plays now with um, or delays or politicizes even the transitions in Trump's peace plan, which is supposed to bring peace to Gaza and reconstruct it. But you see, Israel is delaying every aspect of the plan, and creating many obstacles in the plan. So it extends the misery of the people, and then slowly they leave and leave and leave. And we have been hearing many reports that people are opting to leave if there is a chance for them to leave. So, and I think that's the bigger project. Again, it's the ethnic cleansing and cleaning. Kicking out or getting rid of the indigenous population, so Israel can has the land, all of the land, without the people.
My next question, Professor, is actually about UNRWA. You describe Gaza as the world's largest open-air prison, but this prison had schools, universities, and very young population receiving education, largely through UNRWA. Why is Israel so concentrated on dismantling UNRWA? Why this persistent attempt to associate the agency with Hamas and undermine its very existence?
Because Vladimir, in Israel's mindset and policies, UNRWA represents the international mandate that holds onto Palestinians' rights of return. It is the institution through which the international community has recognized the suffering of the Palestinians. It recognized that there are millions of Palestinian refugees who have been displaced from their own land, and that these people exist, although they're stateless and they don't have a way to go back to their homes. So for Israel, accusing UNRWA of being Hamas or just, I mean, targeting UNRWA itself, I think it's a strategic goal because once you dismantle UNRWA, suffocate it financially, hit its infrastructure, hit its schools, defunded, then UNRWA becomes loses its entire or the sole purpose of its existence to keep the cause of these millions of Palestinians alive until there is a final political settlement. You destroy UNRWA, there is no more right of return. There is no more Palestinians who are receiving education, and they can fight back through their knowledge, and they can keep asking for their rights. So they want to kill this institute because it represents the last standing institute of international will and international consensus. Because just to remind your listeners as well, because when UNRWA was also established, the US endorsed it. But this was an old US. Now we're facing a new US, which also is on board with Israel to finish UNRWA. We know what the Trumps thinks of Palestine and the conflict. He's totally into the Israeli narrative, Netanyahu's narrative. So basically, there is this perfect alignment where you see the US and Israel are really targeting UNRWA viciously to end its presence on the ground, to defund it, delegalize it as well through accusations, etc. You don't have UNRWA, so the question is, who's going to cater health, education, social services for millions of Palestinians who have been deprived from their houses, their incomes, and they live in prisons, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. There are many refugee camps in the West Banks who are amassed with people, like, they live in misery. I mean, because they don't own the land. I mean, they're refugees. So when you target UNRWA, then you make it so difficult for these millions of Palestinians inside the occupied land to continue living and to continue living and staying on their own lands. And then you push them gradually to leave, because they will, I mean, if you deprive them, if you take away the social safety network UNRWA provides to them, I'm talking here mainly about food access to food, access to jobs, access to education, access to health. UNRWA acts like a para state, because it's a huge, one of the biggest UN missions in the world, because it caters services to millions of Palestinian refugees. So you kill this institute, you kill this body, then these people will have to look for other sources of income to live, to get education, to health services. And the way to look at it to look for these services is to leave Gaza, to leave the West Bank. And that's the long-term goal Israel wants, is to turn these geographical places where Palestinian refugees are living, among of which Gaza is the largest, because as I said before, 70% of Gaza residents are refugees and they receive services from UNRWA. You take away these services from them, in other contexts means there is no government. I mean, imagine you waking up in New York or in Berlin or in France, in Paris, and there is no government. You don't have income, you don't have right to education, you don't have hospitals, utter chaos, and no income, no prospects for living at all. That then immediately people will start looking for other places to move and get these services. And that's exactly what Israel is doing. And it serves its larger, again, colonial uh, project to replace and displace Palestinians once and forever. They want to get rid of this demographic threat. In their mindset, the establishment project of Israel was never completed because Israel was created on its current borders, but still it hosts 7 million Palestinians scattered between Gaza, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and then Palestinians who carry Israeli citizenships who live inside today's Israel as well. In total, you have an equal demographics, almost 7 million Palestinians, 7 million Israelis. For the Israelis, that's a nightmare. They don't believe in a two-state projects. They are so empowered now and so blinded by America's support and the Trump support that they believe, or some elements, many elements in their politician and their parties and among their politicians believe that this is a golden opportunity to finish the establishment whole project of the Israeli state without Palestinians, kick them out. So for them, that's the mindset.
This next question is more philosophical. So, Professor, given Israel's own historical experience, the Holocaust, the genocide of 6 million Jews, 6 million souls vanished in thin air due to the race policies because someone was thinking it was better than Jews, how do we understand a state whose national memory is rooted in such trauma now committing acts that many describe as crimes of the highest order in the 21st century? How does a government cross that line from victimhood to perpetration and become so ruthlessly detached from its own historical lessons?
Well, that's the $1 million question, Vladimir, which I don't have an answer to. And I kept asking this question to myself: how come the same descendants of these Holocaust survivors are able to burn children, destroy hospitals? I mean, mass killings. I mean, genocide. I mean, the entire genocide saga. Gaza is living now and still living. I think this question. I mean, to answer it, it's one has to understand that the current generation of Israelis has been transformed in a very radical way. We're talking about. I mean, so let's put it this way. I mean, Israel was established 1948. So the generation that lives today in Israel, the ones who fight, the army officers, the youngsters who fight in Gaza, these are fourth or fifth generation, if we want to put it this way, and they have been exposed to so much, radicalization from the Zionist movement, from the Israeli right wing, uh, uh, because of I think again because of this sense of supremacy and this religious indoctrination and vicious political ideology of what Zionism resembles. Uh, this young generation we live with today, I mean, current Israelis, uh, remember they are the descendants of the Holocaust. Then they came to Palestine, as most of Israelis or the entire Israeli citizens, being an Israeli citizen will entitle you to serve in the Israeli army. It's a damaged generation, psychologically, because it was born. I'm talking about today's generation. It was born with a sense of normalizing occupation, subjugating an entire nation to checkpoints, to torture, to dehumanization. They have been learning this in schools, in military camps. They have mastered the process of dehumanizing Palestinians and torturing them. And in parallel, they have been fighting in their surrounding many Arab countries. You know, Israel fought in Jordan, fought in Lebanon, it continues fighting in Syria now, in Egypt. So it's a generation that lives or thrives from warfare, from these myths, from a big myth, which is uh, Israel and the supremacy or the of the Jewish race, and uh, also living or subjugating Palestinians, not as military targets or as citizens, but also as workers. You know, many Palestinians work in Israel because they have no other option. So it's like and it's an apartheid system. I forgot to say the mention word, the apartheid. They have created an apartheid system and they have normalized it in their in their mindset and in their behavior. So it has become a norm. So what do you expect from this society? This transformation, these stages of different transformation have created a society of monsters who are really who only think of themselves as a superior race and look of others as non-humans or as non-existent. And I think this is the generation we're dealing with now. It's beyond I think it's beyond recovery, Vladimir. It's a very I mean, I sometimes, I mean, you cannot generalize. I mean, sometimes because you see elements, even small elements in the Israeli society, who are fighting back, who understand this transformation and how ugly it has become, even among Israelis themselves. Because let's not forget that Israelis they're very diverse group of people who are. I mean, you have the ones who came from Europe, the ones who came from the Middle East. I mean, from Africa. So even within this society, there are different hierarchies or social hierarchies and racial hierarchies. So it's a society that was never healthy in any way from the day Israel was establishment until today, with all its conduct on the ground, amassing and creating an apartheid system, then fighting an entire wars in the region. So, of course, the outcome will be a mentally disordered society, which really believes that it is above all other races, and in return, it acts like this. It does not see the human in the other, and this is the country by large we are living with. And I have to stress on something. You see, where is the fight back coming now? It's among American Jews who are really terrified by the monster they're seeing now. And you see this rise of many movement among American Jewish community who are saying not in our name, because they realize now that the outcome of what Israel represents today is an ugly outcome. It's a racial outcome. It does not it has lost many elements of its humanities, and this is why you see even a backlash among the Jewish communities outside Israel that this Israel does not represent us anymore.
The Israeli government often relies on a generalization. Criticism of policy is framed as anti Semitism. When one tries to discuss Palestinian rights, Gaza, or a two-state solution, the response is often silence or accusations. How did we become societies where openly criticizing the government of another country is treated as illegitimate or taboo?
But this has to do again, Vladimir, to really to false I mean false information or lack of education information or an ideological indoctrination. First of all, let me just put it this way: Palestinians in particular and Arabs by large, they are Semitic people, so they cannot be anti themselves. That's number one. So this anti-Semitism logic, it actually anti-Semitism as a term, it was discussed in Europe, not in this part of the world, Palestine and the larger Middle East. Because as I said, racially, Arabs or Middle Eastern by large are Semitic people, so they cannot be anti themselves. Secondly, the Jewish people of this region, this part of the world, are an indigenous population to this region. No one denies their rights as citizens of these regions where they have lived before, be it Egypt, Iraq, Tunisia, Morocco. I mean, Judaism is an indigenous religion to Palestine and to the larger Arab region, including the Arab Peninsula, Saudi Arabia. Historically, there was never a problem, same as the Jewish population of Europe face in this region. because the Jewish population of this region have been always treated as equal citizens of this region historically before the creation of Israel. Actually, many of them were even among the elitists, artists, movie makers, business people, thriving communities. You can look at the history of Egypt, Iraq, Morocco, Tunisia. They were privileged people and looked at with respect, and no one discriminated against them except for maybe few cases here and there, but nothing to be compared with the treatment the Jewish population of Europe has faced because of what Europe used to be. So, for these people who say anti-Semitism and accuse Palestinians of anti-Semitism, first of all, I answered that Palestinians are Semitic people, so they cannot be anti themselves. And even inside Palestine, there are indigenous Jewish populations or Palestinian Jews as well. So that's not a problem for Palestine. Secondly, the entire thing of Holocaust, I myself as a Palestinian, I have all the sympathy for all the Jewish population who have experienced or have been victims of this tragedy, this ugly, horrendous crime, the Holocaust. Of course, but the problem is Palestinians and Arabs per se had nothing to do with this. I mean, the entire thing happened in Germany, in Europe. Why would Palestinians pay a price for a crime the Nazis and Germans have done to the Jewish communities of Europe? Why don't Europeans pay the price for this? I mean, why Palestinians have to pay the price for something they have never done so? They were not even aware about. It's like, until Israel was established, then they understood that there was a big conspiracy, a big planning, for the Zionist movement and the Balfour promise to relocate the Jewish population of Europe to Palestine. So again, this is, for me, it has to do. I mean, these arguments, of course, you expect them anywhere. We engage with them anywhere, but it's all about education. The power of education is so important in today's days for today's generations and future generations to understand the root causes of this problem. Palestinians has nothing to do with this. Holocaust is a tragedy, is a crime of the crimes. It should never happen to any religious, racial, or human group in the world. And again, the Holocaust, the fact that it happened in Europe, does not for sure justify Israel's behavior or Israel's genocidal war, yeah, for the indigenous people of Palestine. Of course, I mean, because again, this war, it comes on the background of a vicious, one of the longest occupations on modern times that still persists till now. It did not come out of the blue. It did not come out of surprise. I myself have issues with Hamas's strategies of resistance. I believe of the right of resistance, but I also, as a Palestinian, as many Palestinians do, we disagree on the tactics. I have my own opinion on the tactics of resistance, but we all have to resist as Palestinians for this occupation to end. So this genocidal reaction of Israel, genocidal war, is not justified. It's a symptom of a sick society that has been transformed and brainwashed by large, and it has lost its human touch and human nature by large because of the sick nature of the ideology it was created upon, which is Zionism, which is a racist ideology. So if there is anyone I would feel sorry for, I would feel sorry for the Israelis themselves, the descendants of the Holocaust, who have been trapped into another racial supremacist project funded by powerful countries that have that contributed somehow to the Holocaust by being silenced. We know that the Holocaust was happening for years, and great powers like many Western countries, Britain, US, they were silent about it. It only came out to be published or um, to the light when the war ended. Then suddenly we started hearing and seeing the horrors of the camps and the Nazi camps in Poland, etc. So what I'm trying to say is, and this is where I talk to the Israelis by large, that they themselves have to be very aware of them being also a card used by superpowers, okay, until their destiny becomes a question, because what's happening to the Jewish people, or to today's Israel, which represents large interests of the Jewish people, it's becoming a monster state that has no international respect or reputation despite U.S. protection, but it's losing its moral reason to exist, its moral justification, its image. It's depleted, it's trash now, because you cannot and you should not, and no one would tolerate seeing what Israel is doing today, despite the imbalances in power and the protection they're receiving from the US.
You lived in Gaza, and from that vantage point, what is the single biggest misconception international policymakers have about how Gaza actually functioned on a day-to-day basis before this last war? And what did outsiders most consistently misunderstand about life, governance, and survival there?
Gaza was not only exposed or experienced a genocidal war, probably it was one of the only places of the world where during the genocide, people were not even able to take refuge outside Gaza or leave the borders. I mean, if I want to compare this with wars in the Balkans, wars in any parts of in Sudan, I mean, people could somehow leave and take refuge. I mean, in Egypt, there are like 5, 7 million, maybe 3 to 4 million Syrians. There were Syrians, then Sudanese. I mean, people, Iraqis left, Syrians left, Sudanese left, and then they came back. But even under the genocide, Gazans were deprived from their right as human beings to leave Gaza. And this is a tragedy by itself, because I'm one of the luckiest, or the few luckiest, who was outside Gaza when this war started. I don't I am It's hard to me to speak on behalf of my relatives or friends or the larger Gazans who were stuck there. I think their faith and their belief in humanity for sure has changed, drastically changed. I am afraid that the traumas they have been exposed to have really changed uh, changed them drastically in a negative way. I'm not questioning their resilience that they want to stay on their lands, but what I'm trying to say that if, and that's a big if there is a reconstruction mission that will take place in the near future, Gaza will need not only stones and cement and roads. I think it needs all types of psychological trauma related assistances uh, uh, for it to treat a very traumatized population, the largest among the largest, 2 million, who have, I think, not only lost hope in humanity, maybe lost hope in themselves as well. And I don't want even to I cannot imagine how people are living there now after 2 years of horrors, and still now they cannot have a shelter or a roof on the top of their houses, and they have to fight survival of the fittest, basically, to get food or water, access to food or water, which Israel still controls. So it's dehumanizing. The process of mass killing now is more or less over. There is still violence, but now it's Israel still continues with the dehumanization process to an extreme extent. And I've never experienced something like this in my life. I mean, since I was born, I haven't read about this. I mean, even the Holocaust, during the Holocaust, if you could flee, you will be able to flee. But Gaza, it's the only place in the world where you are caged and you're waiting for your time to die or bombed for 2 years, and you are not allowed to flee. And even when the conflict is over in its ugly shape or tendency, you're still being dehumanized. I mean, you're not. So it defies. I mean, the size of the tragedy. I really can't think of its implications, and I would be horrified if hopefully one day I go back home. I'm expecting that the human in Gaza has been so effectively negatively changed, or I don't want to say damaged, because I always want to restrain or keep some hope, but I don't know. I put it this way: I don't know what how to talk to my relatives. Even I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what I mean. They're still suffering. That's the third year they're still suffering. How would you justify to any human being telling them you have to live in this cage, you have to be dehumanized, you have to be to be deprived from food and assistance, and wait for American politicians, Israeli politicians, to decide on your faith in the time they see it works for them? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I really don't have an answer. But it's a tragedy. It's just a tragedy.
In 2025, several states recognized Palestine as a sovereign state, and the international community, it continues to invoke the two-state solutions. But for years, the reality for Palestinians in Gaza, and I would argue also in the West Bank, has been what some describe as a non-state solution or permanent limbo. How does this condition of being neither sovereign nor integrated, neither at a war nor at a peace, serve certain political and economic interests?
I mean, first of all, of course, it serves Israel because Israel's excuse is always we don't have a partner, we don't have legit institutions. When they did, but they kept fighting these or attacking these partners, so they could use this claim. Secondly, since you mentioned Vladimir, the countries who have recognized Palestine, I think in my opinion, this recognition should not be symbolic or just comes on paper and in terms of opening embassies and raising flags. That's good, but certainly it's not enough. And nothing stops these countries that have recognized Palestine or the right of Palestine to exist as a state from exercising their rights as independent countries and taking a stand against Israel, if not in a collective way, in a unilateral way. I mean, to start punishing Israel. And when I say punishing Israel, I'm not saying go and fight Israel. We know Israel is very powerful and the US is backing it. I'm talking about simple things, starting from trade, um, uh, uh, banning trades, revoking free visa travels. If the Israelis don't feel the pain, if the common ordinary Israelis, they don't feel the consequences of their government's choices and their genocidal wars and all the horrors they inflict on Palestine and the region, why would they change their action and discourse? So what I'm trying to say, we have a model. The model is the South African apartheid regime, which was more or less which collapsed when countries started taking applying sanctions, whether collectively or unilaterally. I'm not waiting for the US. The US was actually one of the last countries to even apply any pressure or even did not apply any pressure on apartheid South Africa until the regime collapsed. But what I'm saying, why Israelis are still being able to travel freely to the EU when many EU countries have recognized Palestine, or they are even horrified by the Israeli prime minister who was on a war crimes. Why not to start taking actions? I remember, I mean, I'm half Balkan, you know, and you're from the Balkan. I mean, Serbs were immediately denied or deprived from their visa travel under old Yugoslavia because of Milosevic actions in the Balkan and wars. So there are precedents, collective and unilateral, that countries can take on Israel so the Israelis can be feel the pressure. And I'm saying the simplest ones, but very effective, because this will be the wake up call for all Israelis, is start with trade measures, reduce trade or cut trade, apply visa sanctions, and you know, boycott, academic boycott, a political boycott. That's the minimum. So these recognitions, again, I have a feeling that these countries who have recognized, including Canada, UK, France, that's it. This was the maximum or the ceiling they can get to. And that's false, because they can certainly do more, but they are not doing more. And that's a problem with me. Now, back to your question, this relates also to the no statehood project, or this limbo where we have a Palestinian Authority institution under limited sovereignty there, but we don't have a full state. Again, that's not the issue Palestinians have to answer for. The problem is with Israel's occupation. Israel is the country that is not allowing a Palestinian statehood to be established. Palestinians are very skillful, are very knowledgeable. They already, I mean, they know how to manage their education systems, how to create their own governance systems, but they need freedom to do so. They cannot do so under occupation policies, under blockades, under checkpoints, under raids. And this is where the international community has to come very strong and in a powerful way to stop it. Because remember, the same international community, which has also recognized Palestine, and it's still funding the bill of Israeli occupation. And when I say this, I say by even providing aid to Palestinians and not being able to challenge Israel on its occupation policy, it becomes complicit in normalizing and sustaining Israel occupation because Israel does not feel any burden or does not pay any price for keeping its 5 stars occupation. Someone's paying the bills for the Palestinians. These are the donors from taxpayer money. While Israel is saying, well, I can keep control of my land or control of land and build more settlements. The Palestinians are receiving money from different donors. They will stay afloat. They will have enough food and water to live, and then there is no problem. I don't feel any pressure coming from anywhere, not from these donor countries, not from these countries who have recognized Palestine. No pressure whatsoever. So I think the way forward, moving forward, is if the UN is unable to solve it, and obviously it will not be able to solve it because you'll always have an American veto, then no one stops Britain alone, or France alone, or Spain alone, or South Africa alone, or China even, which has been invisible. They just say good statements to take unilateral measures by themselves against Israel by saying, well, enough is enough. We cannot tolerate this occupation and this genocidal war. If you're not going to change your discourse, we're going to cut trade agreements. We're going to apply visa measures on you, etc., etc. You know, so these are things that countries can do unilaterally, and they have the moral commitments to do it unilaterally. But sadly, they are not, Vladimir, because we don't live in a logical or fair world as one would expect.
One term constantly used in relation to Gaza is resilience, often as a praise for Palestinian society. So, from a policy perspective, can this celebration of Palestinian resilience also function as a way for the international system to outsource its own responsibilities, expecting people to endure indefinitely rather than demanding a political solution?
Perfect. Yeah. This is a very important question, and it goes back to my previous point of Israel not feeling any pressure and maintaining a 5 stars occupation, which does not cost it anything, no financial burden, no political burden, nothing, no consequences whatsoever. And that's the problem. I think the international community, out of goodwill, is trying to help Palestinians. But again, this help which comes through aid contribution, through humanitarian aid, development aid, capacity building, you know, training, etc. It's very appreciated, but it should not be a constant status quo that really Palestinians more or less embrace, and it should not be the limit or the ceiling that stops from going for the lasting solution, the political one, which you have mentioned. It's not sustainable because it does not deter Israel from continuing its colonial settler policies. It's not enough for it to deter Israelis. So what's happening now, this notion of resilience, it is there, but it will not sustain, not because Palestinians are not receiving enough support from the outside, but because while Palestinians are receiving this support and being resilient and paying a heavy price in resisting occupation and sticking to their holding to their land, the Israelis are pushing them militarily, are destroying their camps, are killing them, are reducing the populations. They are turning the experience of Gaza now, transferring it to other parts of the West Bank. We have seen what they have done last year in the Jenin refugee camp. They also destroyed the entire camp. So it's not enough. Of course, not enough. So this notion of resilience, as important as it is, but it will, if it does not deter, it will not deter Israel from continuing with its occupation policies that aim in most of its parts to displace Palestinians outside. We don't want to lose the populations. If Palestinians lose the populations, their demographics on the ground, because of what Israel then exercises in terms of military occupation, confiscating more land and resources, then we have a lost cause. I mean, a land without its own people, it does not become home or a nation state, and that's what everyone worldwide needs to understand. That time is not on the Palestinian sides if the international community does not find a way to stop Israel. Stop it, and bring it to the table to try and revive the political project, the two states project.
Professor, we know that major Western powers are unlikely to change their paradigm toward Israel anytime soon. Is there a risk that Gaza becomes so normalized as an exception that the international system no longer even recognizes it as crisis, but merely as a management problem?
I think that's an excellent question, Vladimir, and I fear and I would worry that it's that Gaza now is becoming more or less a second or third priority now in international politics, because of one simple also fact that I would call it the attention cycle notion. There is always, I mean, global attention or human attention always shifts to other emerging problems. So it was Gaza during the last 2 years. Now there's Venezuela and Ukraine again. They're on the top of the news. And then I don't know if it will be Taiwan at the end of the year. We never know. I mean, so, but the attention is focused on other evolving tragedies or problems elsewhere, which might also inflict more human losses and damage, and that's the normal of life. So the nature of life, and so I worry that among this shifting, changing international scene of so many emerging conflicts also uh, happening now, that Gaza will receive by time less and less attention, and then the entire intervention or focus will turn into a crisis management opposite to relief, reconstruction, and bringing the political aspect of the problem on the table. And I would worry from this scenario because also the Israelis are masters in shifting the priorities and transforming the mood from urgency to crisis management to something else. So they are also masters in playing these games and buying times and creating so many obstacles. So how to move on from this? I'll tell you, when it comes to Gaza, it should not be about again Israel and the U.S. Steering the wheels. There are countries who have been involved in the Trump's 20 points plan, peace plan. These are important European countries, Arab countries, close allies to the U.S. They have the moral responsibility and the political responsibility to keep the pressure on the Trump administration, because that's the only way, that's the only window of hope I can see happening now from a political perspective, is Trump committed for some sort of a solution to bring peace and end the war in Gaza and allow for reconstruction, with the benefits or the he will get from such an intervention from close Arab allies who have joint economic, political, and business interests with them. So that's the only window of hope I see it now from a pragmatic, a politically perspective.
Next, I want to talk about reconstruction. Gaza has gone through repeated cycles of devastating wars, followed by promises of reconstruction. After this war, much of Gaza has been physically erased. Can you walk us through the political economy of reconstruction? Who controls materials, funding, permits, and how these cycles tend to reinforce dependency and the status quo rather than genuine recovery. Is there any reason to believe this time will be different?
Yes. So from previous experiences, again, reconstruction experiences, because Gaza has witnessed 3 or 4 mini conflicts, nothing similar to this last war, and the reconstruction processes in these previous small conflicts was very painful, and if I may say, was never completed. So Gaza endured 4 wars, and it never healed 100% from these wars. Why? Because, first of all, Israel controls the ins and outs of what comes in and out of Gaza. It has full control over the borders, and it masters the vetting process and applying so many obstacles and constraints on any normal reconstruction process that let's say in other contexts can take months, and but in Gaza, because of Israeli control measures, will take years. So, moving to your question, there's big issues to look at when it comes to today's realities and the prospect of reconstruction. First of all, who is gonna pay the bill? Number one. Uh, so we have verbally we have committed donors, but these same donors, rightfully, they want to see a political path. They don't want to invest in a reconstruction process where Israel again, after a couple of years, launches another military campaign and destroy what I call peace dividends. So you have Arab countries, rich Gulf countries, who are, for the first time when they gathered in Cairo in this summit last year, they said we are committed to reconstruct Gaza and to finance the reconstruction process, pending there is a track to a Palestinian stated project. So that's a condition, a commitment with a condition. We don't see it realizing so far because the Israelis are really not talking about any political project, and the Americans are even not there. So they are more or less in this crisis management mood, which you have mentioned before. Secondly, the Israeli factor. If Israel remains in control physically of Gaza, I don't see any potential for a real construction process because the Israelis will definitely delay it and deviate the entire scope of the process, and even yeah, I mean historically they have done so. So I don't see any sincere interest by the Israelis to do so. And thirdly, also construction under which governance conditions for the Palestinians. We don't want, assumingly, presumably, if there is a reconstruction process, and that's a big if, will it be conducted for Gaza under new parallel structures that do not relate or do not more or less bring any prospects for a Palestinian statehood? I mean, Gaza and the West Banks, these are supposed to be two similar uh, Palestinian Authority institutions, but because of the split, they were segregated for more than 16, 17 years. But now we don't want to see the danger of a reconstruction process that contributes to even widening the split between the West Bank and Gaza and diminishing a prospect of a Palestinian statehood. So, in the Israeli mindset, if I might analyze it, I mean, if the Americans force the Israelis to engage with the reconstruction scenario and allow it to happen, and the Israelis will withdraw from the scene, it's of Israel's interest to deprive this or to make sure that this happens under a new Palestinian structures or autocratic structures that that perform and operate away from the West Bank ones. So again, Israel keeps this strategic split between the two Palestinian geographies. That's the Israelis' mindset. So all these are serious obstacles, and but the most important of which, in my opinion, is remains like this: are the Israelis and the Americans really sincere about allowing Palestinians to return and not displacing the population, and then blessing this reconstruction process? Uh, I'm not sure so far. It's yet to be seen. Stage one is over from the Trump plan, which focus on releasing the captives, the Israeli captives, not the Palestinians. There's still so many Palestinian captives and dead Palestinians who have not been recovered from under the debris. But it's yet to be seen whether Israel will go. I mean, as donors or Arab countries who have endorsed the Trump plan, put a condition that we want to see all our money and the reconstruction process as part of a bigger political project that revives the discussion on the statehood project between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the larger statehood project. I'm not sure we're there. I'm not sure to what extent the Trump administration is committed to that goal per se, although it is there in the plan. I mean, it's explicit and vivid. It's yet to be seen, and I'm not sure whether there will be another round of violence even, or a continuation of war, because the Israelis now are in violation of all the agreements. I mean, now they are on daily basis they attack. You know, they have created this yellow line. They're controlling more than 50% of the Gaza Strip now. And just yesterday and the day before, they have been pushing it even more deeper. So they are taking more lands and destroying more houses. So what we see on the ground is Israel re-engineering the space of the strip, re-engineering geography and the land. It seems to be in preparation of something that would serve its interests per se, not the Palestinian interests. And it's yet to be seen whether Trump or this international coalition, which has endorsed his plan, will be able to put things on track according to Trump's plan.
Professor, where do you see the greatest stress points or potential breaking moments within Palestinian politics, regional realignments, or the legitimacy of the international management model itself? I mean, I'm asking you this because we have a shaky ceasefire that Israel repeatedly violated and no clear roadmap for US plan for Gaza. How long can this system be sustained without completely breaking Palestinian society or erasing Gaza and the two-state solution from the international agenda altogether?
Yeah, true. I mean, there's so many uncertainties. It's not even uncertainty. I mean, the violence continues in the occupied land on daily basis. Maybe it's not receiving the proper attention, but the West Bank is in a miserable situation where daily attacks of Israeli settlers, soldiers are becoming a routine. Gaza is, of course, we know where is Gaza standing now. It's in despair. Uh, the problem is again, and being very realistic, and at the same time, I mean, we have to be realistic when we analyze. If we look at the entire region itself, it's not in a healthy shape. I mean, post Arab Spring, the entire Arab region has been fragmented. There is turmoil, civil wars in many countries, in Sudan, in Yemen, in Libya. Syria is a huge mess. Lebanon has been just came out from a vicious Israeli attack. Iran, it's the entire region is in turmoil. And the only few remaining countries which do have some political and economic leverage to exercise on the Americans, I would say Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other GCC countries, maybe Egypt as well. It has a great political strategic relation with the US. I mean, these countries are the only ones who maybe, I mean, if they choose to exercise their leverage, I'm not sure to what extent they can do it also to put some pressure on Trump, because they remain strategic countries even for US foreign policies. And I'm sure Trump also and the American administration has interest to keep the relation healthy with these countries in this emerging multipolar world, because we see competition. I mean, China wants to have presence here. The Russians are also, you know, what are the Russians have been doing in Syria, now in Libya, it seems in Sudan. So this area remains a very strategic part of the world, and there is this competition on it. And I think it's in the US's interest also to more or less maybe uh, uh, create or contribute to solving the Palestinian problem, because it will really diffuse tensions in this region. I think it's the only remaining conflict that has been toxicating the relation between the entire region and the US or the West, if I put it this way. Then, on the other hand, you have Europe itself. Europe is a neighbor. That's the Mediterranean region. Europe has borders with this region, and it has been affected negatively by influxes of refugees and you know, and other instabilities, other factors because of the instability of this region. So they have also stakes in this. You know, they have also to push further. When it comes to the Palestinian political internal house, it remains split, sadly, and it is and it is a scandal. I'll tell you this way, as a Palestinian, it's a scandal that uh, that 2 or 3 years after this genocidal war, that we still have a split national movement, where you have the Fatah and PLO from one side, and then Hamas, it's still there, and these two parties are unable to reconcile until now and unite in one internal house. But it has to do not with the agency factor, the internal Palestinian agency, but I think Israel has also contributed to the split because it controls the political space inside occupied land, and it really it has the leverage and the strength to push or to put conditions or obstacles on the table to prevent this unity from materializing between Fatah and Hamas. But again, it doesn't justify. I think the Palestinian leadership in the Palestinian movement has really failed Palestinians on all fronts, and it's a question. And it faces existential question: to be or not to be. I mean, it's a historical moment for it to unite and to stand united to stop Israel's project of displacing the Gaza residents, to bring back the Palestinian statehood project on the table, and also to have a united vision of what do Palestinians want apart from Hamas and Fatah, because Hamas and Fatah are two large parties, but then you have Palestine, the bigger Palestine that goes beyond these two parties, and I think it is time for them to unite, and I know there are attempts in Cairo, in Egypt, Arab countries are trying to mediate. Let's hope it works. Overall, it's not a very, I wouldn't say it's an optimistic scene, but one has to remain optimistic because, uh, not optimistic. I mean, you have to believe that something at least will come out of all these sacrifices, out of all these horrors, that at least Palestinians will get their state, they will get their dignity back as human beings. I do believe in the international will, even though I understand that the international political system or international system has failed Palestinians. It's not even Palestinians. It's failing itself as well because it's not becoming a relevant reference for any country in the world. It has been marginalized, and we live more or less like in a political jungle where powerful states get to do what they want. We are witnessing more or less a rebirth of a new international system. I'm not sure how will it look after these fights all over the world, including Palestine, Iran, Venezuela. This notion of multipolarism and the emergence of the new world order. At some point, I think it will reach its peak with conflicts and competition, but then it will stop. And when it stops, we will see what this new international system will look like. Who are the winners, the losers? Will it be better or not? But I think the international system, or as it used to be now, it's dead, clinically dead. I don't think there is any point of. I mean, it still remains there, but it's not really. It doesn't have any leverage. So, in the midst of all these changes, complex changes, I think let's hope at least that there will be um, uh, some sincere political will by even Trump himself, because I know with all his controversial legacy, maybe he wants to get to this Nobel Peace Prize by at least solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, let's hope if that's a real wish or something he's committed to, then that's a window of hope. If not, I'm afraid the misery will continue and it will not remain inside the occupied land. It will spread around, and everyone will feel the heat or the consequences of neglecting the horrors in Palestine and allowing Israel to act unilaterally above international law and destabilize international region. Because I think Israel cannot continue on its path with what's doing now, even despite U.S. Support. Because again, there are more emerging conflicts and in other priorities that will also leave Israel somehow to live with its own wrongdoings, and it has to come to a moment of wisdom and maybe logic where maybe it will opt to sit and discuss peace as well. Let's hope. But I don't have any clear answer, Vladimir. These are all hopes.
Professor, in the West Bank, territory is shrinking daily. Settler violence continues unchecked. We have plan for Gaza that nobody truly understands or believes will work or how it will work. Have we reached a point where the dream of a Palestinian state or a two-state solution is effectively slipping away while the world is consumed by other crises?
So that's an excellent question, Vladimir. And I don't have an answer, but I have scenarios. I mean, based on realities on the ground. So okay, basically, so if Israel chooses to destroy the two states projects, and that's obviously that's Israel's behavior now, then it has two options to end up with: the one state project, because despite all the horrors Israel's have inflicted on Palestinians so far, there are still around 7 million Palestinians who live inside the occupied land, alongside 7 or 8 million Israelis. So the demographics are there. Palestinians, and that's the resilience, it goes back to the resilience notion. Palestinians are not going anywhere for simple reasons. Uh, they know if they leave, it will be one-way ticket because they have seen their ancestors kicked out of their houses, and then they will never they will never able to go back. And secondly, because and that's also um, it's controversial, and I'm against it because even Palestinians themselves don't have a chance to cross the borders and be accepted by other countries. So you see how the tragedy it is. It is like because most Arab countries and actually many countries around the world have took a decision not to play into Israel's logic. Please receive Palestinians, take Palestinians because they have become refugees or they need to recover from the genocidal war. No countries are closing the doors on this option. So the Israelis, if they want to kick out these 7 million, including 2 million Palestinians who remain in Gaza, uh, then they have two scenarios. Number one is to mass them all on ships and send them to the sea, and I don't think this is feasible. And probably the Americans were contemplating this with this Pearl thing they have done during the Gaza, the small port project, which failed drastically. And because no country is willing to receive Palestinians, the it's a political and moral principle that is controversial. Because as a Palestinian, I also want to feel to be able to take refuge in a country during a war. But the entire world has closed its doors to Palestinians because as a reaction to Israeli colonial and displacement policies. So Palestinians are paying the price. So they remain under Israel's occupation, but at the same time, most of the entire world is also not accepting them. It's a political and moral decision as well. That has consequences on Palestinians. But overall, if the Israelis to get rid of Palestinians, they have to fight wars again, open frontiers with surrounding countries. Meaning, if they want to displace Palestinians the same way they displaced them in 1948, they will need to have wars with Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon for them to be able to kick out Palestinians. And this idea, I don't think it's feasible anymore because most of these countries have peace treaties with Israel, plus the international community, including the Americans and the Europeans, and no one is will support Israel in this scenario. What I'm trying to say here, despite everything Israel does, the demographics are still there. Palestinians, they could be reduced in numbers, but also the high birth rate is remains also high among Palestinians. They are not going anywhere. So the Israelis, what they're doing, it will take them either to a regional war project to displace Palestinians, where they attack borders or invade borders with Jordan and Egypt. And this is a horrifying scenario for the Israelis themselves to fight all these countries, or it will go to the one state project, which personally I don't mind if it brings equal rights to Palestinians and Israelis, same like South Africa. I have no problem with it. But do the Israelis Can the Israelis accept this? It's yet to be seen. But I think again, this notion that the Israelis, they're so blinded by their military strength and power that they think they could um, empty the land totally from its population. I think the Israelis are also strategically stuck because even now, at this moment, when me and you are talking, there are two equal, the population sides on both sides are almost equal in the occupied land. So they are in a strategic deadlock. What they have done so far is destroyed their image as a criminal state, lost international support, become more and more marginalized and isolated. They feel it, they sense it. And this is why what I said before is that countries globally, beyond UN, beyond international consensus, can take unilateral actions to so Israelis can feel more heat. They can pay a bigger price of the crimes they are doing in Palestine until they surrender and compromise. Same like South Africa. So it's a critical juncture, it's a critical moment. If these dynamics all come together, maybe you will see a shift in Israeli policies or a realization that we have been killing Palestinians for 70 years since the establishment of Israel, but Palestinians remain on their land. They're not going anywhere. We are stuck with them. That's if they get to this realization, then maybe again the two-state project can be revived or a one-state project can be revived. Other than this, the third option is ugly because it will be a regional war with Israel and its entire surrounding, destroying previous peace agreements and creating massive, huge instability. That's my thinking process.
At the end, you now teach future policymakers, they're young people. Do you see, do you sense optimism among them about the future of Palestinians and Israelis, especially given the reality that neither people is going anywhere?
I, I, I think again the ball is in Israel's courtyard, meaning uh, in 2002 the entire the Arab summit, an important Arab summit took place in Beirut in 2002, and all Arab countries agreed to propose to Israel recognition in return for Israel to accept a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders as was envisioned by Oslo, which never materialized. This was during Bush the son, and I think it was I don't remember who was Israeli. Benjamin Netanyahu was the Israeli prime minister, and they trashed it. Netanyahu trashed the entire thing. So the problem is not in the Arab region. So because for the first time in history, you have all Arab countries coming together in one meeting and say, we will recognize Israel in return for a Palestinian state. And the Israelis rejected this. These are facts. No one can question this. Anyone can Google it. The 2002 Arab Summit in Lebanon, Beirut. Nothing happened. Okay. What we see again, back to your question, Arabs by large, they don't have a problem with Jewish people. As I said again, they look at they look at Israelis as uh, I mean the Jewish people, the residents of Israel, uh, can easily. I think they feel closer to this region culturally and socially and religiously than any other region of the world. I'm trying to see that Israel, in its current shape today, if it has the opportunity and it has the chance by making peace with Palestinians to have this open bridge with the entire region and coexist and melt with the region because culturally and ethnically there's so many commonalities. Even the language is close to Arabic, Hebrew and Arabic. They're close to it, but they don't realize how close and how prosperous they could live in this region if they decide to change their mindset on this idea. Let me put it this way: for Israel to survive, it has to let go of Zionism and become a normal Israel without an ideology, a state for its own citizens without Zionism. If it reaches to this point, it will have a chance to integrate in this region and even flourish in this region because there are so many commonalities between Israel and its neighbors, the larger region, But without this realization, this extreme ideology, this racist ideology, if it remains in control and materialized through the right wing, the current right wing in Israel, and the people we see talking, including Netanyahu and his sick coalition, I think it will remain in a constant fighting mood. And I mean, societies or nation states will remain in a constant fighting mood for a long time. I'm sure it's not healthy for any society to live in constant wars. I mean, this is a different topic. You can talk about all these negative impacts and horrors of having a society living through these constant wars. The region is much more bigger than Israel. Israel is such a small country. It has to pick and choose strategically. What does it want to serve its own interests and reconcile with this region through making peace with Palestinians, or it wants to remain in a constant fighting mood with 500 million Arab and Muslims surrounding it, and it's a country of 7 million. Make the calculations and the numbers. Despite the fatigueness of this region, the political turmoil many countries are living now, be it in Syria, be it in Sudan, be it in anywhere else, I'm telling you, this region is not going anywhere. The question is for Israel, does it want to be part of it in a peaceful way, or it wants to constantly fight it until, I don't want to anticipate the end, but the numbers can talk themselves. 500 million, close to 500 million Arabs and Iranians and Turks, they're not going anywhere. Israel has to reconcile this fact. Either it integrates in a peaceful way, in a humane way, or it chooses its own destiny.
Dr. Qarmout, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Vladimir.
This was my conversation with Tamer Qarmout. Tomorrow we continue with Moin Rabani, looking at the Gaza exception from the perspective of international politics and global power. That interview is available from Monday, 8 p.m. GMT. From Frontlines and Backrooms, until next time.